Provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Happy President's Day. I hope you had a great weekend, and we are certainly going to cover a lot of different issues over the next few days, and so I'm looking forward to that. But this hour, we're going to focus on a little bit of time and attention on the HeartStrong Faith Women's Bible Conference, although we're going to certainly move beyond that as well, because we'll have with us Rebecca Carrell, who, if you are not familiar, is an author, conference speaker, and morning radio talk show host on 90.9 KCBI, author of a couple of books, Holy Jelly Beans, as well as Holy Hiking Boots. But she was the one that founded what's called the HeartStrong Faith Conference, and it is a women's ministry. And this weekend, there's an opportunity for those of you that are women to attend. We're going to be talking about that, but also broadly look at the issue of women's ministry. She, by the way, is working towards her master's degree in theology at Dallas Theological Seminary, and has also joined us from time to time when we've had some of these Christian writer conferences. So, Rebecca, thank you for joining us today here on Point of View.
It's an honor to be on with you, Kerby. Thank you.
I might just mention that some of our listeners don't live in Dallas, but the majority of the listeners during this hour do. So anybody that's listening probably can attend the conference. And first of all, I guess we might want to talk about it, because each year this has been taking place. And I just thought, obviously you've been promoting it on your radio station, but I just thought that it would be important for people to know about this, because you're going to have people like Sheila Walsh, as well as you and a variety of other women. And so this is just a great opportunity this weekend for them to gather together on Friday night and Saturday to really learn a little bit more about women and some of the challenges you women face. So if you can, share with us what will be taking place at the conference.
Well, I'd love to, and thank you for the opportunity. So HeartStrong Faith was born out of a desire to see more expository teaching. And what tends to happen, and Kerby, I imagine you haven't been to too many women's conferences. they're often a great women's event. There'll be very powerful worship, fantastic speakers who inspire and encourage. But my experience was always, by the time I got home, I had kind of picked up all my problems and was frustrated all over again. And so our desire with the HeartStrong Faith Women's Bible Conference is to really encourage women to go deeper in their study, because we don't want to just teach them out of the Bible, which we do. We also want to teach them how to read the Bible for themselves. And so we require a lot of our speakers. We ask them to go into context, like when you're reading a scripture out of the book of Jeremiah, who was Jeremiah initially writing to, and why was he writing? And things like, we have to know what the Lord was saying to the original audience before we can take that scripture and apply it to our own lives. And so the ultimate goal of the HeartStrong Faith Women's Bible Conference is to build biblical literacy, because we've just seen such a dramatic drop in it over the past few decades. And there is so much material out there about the Bible. We have devotionals, we have books about the Bible, 5 biblical principles to have a better marriage, or things like that. But women need to be encountering Christ on their own in the scriptures, and they won't know how to do that unless we teach them.
One of the things I noticed about last year is, of course, you had a kind of a who's who lineup of individuals many of us know as individuals that are certainly known for speaking about and teaching about the Bible. This year, you have, in general, and not Sheila Walsh, but many of the others are much younger, but I know enough about some of them to know that they're wives of pastors, and they bring a lot of biblical study, as of course you do as a student at Dallas Theological Seminary. And I think that's really important so that we get beyond the superficial into really an in-depth study of God's Word.
Yes, and you just hit the nail on the head right there, beyond the superficial. Because my ultimate goal here and the goal of the teachers is really not to send the women away feeling better about themselves. We want to send them away feeling better and more equipped on their own ability to interact with the Scriptures. Because we are just seeing so much, and I know you address a lot of these topics on your show. We're seeing the crumbling of society around us, especially from a moral standpoint. And it's as though we've lost our sense of true north, and everybody has their own truth, and that's just not the way it is. We have to teach the women that there is one truth, and it's in the Scriptures, and Jesus Christ is the answer to that aching in their heart, that longing in their soul. They don't need to feel better about themselves. They need to be more equipped to discover God's truth on their own.
Might just mention we do have a link to, again, HeartStrongFaith.com. We have it under the picture of Rebecca Carrell, but also a separate article. So either way, you can find it very easily on our website, pointofview.net. And again, there's a place for you to buy tickets, and I would encourage any of you women to do so. And Rebecca, speak to that for just a minute, because some of the women might say, well, I got a women's ministry in my own church. Why would I need to go? And of course, we've always joked about around this table that, the women's ministry at a church always is doing pretty well because they develop those steel magnolia relationships. And so usually those are doing very well. Us guys, we do a men's relationship and it's a little tougher. And so we got to work harder. But
right.
Still, even if you're going to a women's ministry at your own church, I think this is going to be a game changer, if I can use that a little bit of a tired cliche, because it really will help you begin to energize you and help you to develop the tools necessary so you can study God's Word on your own.
Well, what I would love to see happen is, regardless of how active you are in the women's ministry in your church, you are the key to strengthening your women's ministry. Because you're right, Kerby, women tend to bond more over emotions and problems and feelings. And the HeartStrong Faith Women's Bible Conference is to challenge women everywhere to move beyond that and interact with the Scriptures with our minds. And one of my favorite Bible teachers, I've sat under most of her studies, her name is Jen Wilkin. She says, the heart cannot love what the mind does not know. And so what my heart's desire is to see less of the video-driven Bible studies that are so common in women's ministry gatherings and more women rising up to take that role themselves. Because the Bible and theology is always done best in community. And so we really are about equipping you and educating you, to strengthen your women's ministry and to strengthen the women's community at your church. And I think you'll find those tools at the HeartStrong Faith Women's Bible Conference through each of the speakers.
We're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll continue our conversation with Rebecca Carrell. By the way, if you've got a question, feel free to give us a call, although I suspect everything you need is already on our website, pointofview.net. We also have a link to her as well if you'd like to follow her on Twitter or Facebook. And, of course, we have all sorts of information about, again, HeartStrong. Again, that is a great opportunity for you to learn a little bit more. It's heartstrongfaith.com, and we have those resources as well on our website. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about how this can be helpful in your life. And Rebecca has been very honest about some of the things that have helped her grow and help her to deal with certain issues like anxiety and others. And so we certainly want to give you that opportunity to attend the conference, but also we want to broaden that to look at the challenges that women are facing here in the 21st century and how we can meet those needs from biblical perspectives. We'll continue our conversation right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
The political drama in Virginia might just be a preview of a wild, contentious Democratic primary. In fact, Rich Lowry believes we might be seeing the beginning of the first woke primary. To be woke is to be alert and sensitive to any injustice, whether real or perceived. A governor had an image of someone in blackface in his medical school yearbook. That apparently was enough to call for his resignation. Democrats in Virginia faced a growing problem. The publication of an image in blackface in the governor's yearbook was followed by an admission from the attorney general that he had used blackface as well. All the while, accusations were swirling around the lieutenant governor, who was accused of sexual assault. We've been told to believe all women. If so, then he would have to go as well. The controversy in Virginia is merely a preview of a woke primary where any mistake or misjudgment, even in the distant past, can be disqualifying. Any misstep will be viewed through the most hostile lens from a radicalized base of Democratic voters. Rich Lowry concludes the Democrat nomination battle might as well be fought on the campus of Oberlin College and officiated by the Director of Office of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. White male candidates don't stand a chance. Senator Elizabeth Warren has been criticized for pretending to be a Native American and forced to apologize. Senator Kirsten Gillibrand was confronted on television because a number of years ago she used the term illegal alien. She said she was embarrassed and forced to apologize for a term that was in common usage at the time. And even Senator Kamala Harris has been criticized because she was once a prosecutor. This may be the most contentious and controversial primary season we've ever seen in America. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
From roadside attractions, Run the Race. Two brothers share an unbreakable bond, but life's unexpected adversities put their future in question. Run the Race, rated PG, in theaters February 22nd.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Privileged to have with us today Rebecca Carrell, a morning co-host on KCBI as well as an author. And I might just mention her books that we talked about just briefly. Holy Jelly Beans, Finding God Through Everyday Things, and Holy Hiking Boots, When God Makes the Ordinary Extraordinary. And again, we're talking about the conference, although I do want to broaden that in just a minute to talk about some of the issues that women are facing in the 21st century. But just before we do that, let's again come back to the conference for just a minute, Rebecca, and talk about what is going to take place. It's Friday from 7 to 9:45, Saturday from 9 to 3:30. What will individuals, the women that sign up and buy tickets, encounter when they show up at the conference?
Well, first of all, they're going to encounter a party because this is just the third year in a row we've done it, and we hosted the conference takes place at First Baptist Church of Dallas, and they do such a wonderful job. And so we have all kinds of fun areas set up where women can take their pictures and meet the speakers, get books signed, and things like that. And then we open up with worship, and then we really get to work, Kerby. We don't waste a whole lot of time. We push up our sleeves, and each of the speakers teaches through a chunk of the scripture and teaches us how to study the Bible for ourselves as we go. And so each teacher is going to be offering their own Bible study tricks. They're going to be teaching about the context of the scripture that they're teaching through, and they're going to be teaching us the eternal or the ongoing spiritual principle that we can pull from the Bible. Because I think it's worth saying and admitting that the Bible is a difficult book in that it's several thousand years old. So we have a huge time bridge that we have to build. It was written on 3 different continents. It was written in 3 different languages. And so there's a lot of groundwork to be done so that we can fully understand what the scriptures meant to the original audience, so that we can then take those spiritual principles and apply them to our lives today. Because you can have all the Bible knowledge in the world, but unless you are applying it to your specific situation today, it's not doing a whole lot of good. So there'll be 2 speakers on Friday night, and then the remaining 4 speakers on Saturday.
And again, when we talk so often here on Point of View about biblical literacy, first of all, a lot of people don't know their Bible, although I'll give credit to the fact that sometimes women might have a little more free time and also a greater desire than men to get into God's Word, but certainly that is the very important issue. So it's certainly exegesis, but most importantly, I appreciate the fact that you have the same kind of philosophy I do, and that is to apply it. I mean, to put shoe leather to it. Rebecca, I've said this on this program too many times, but I've got to say at least one more time. People, when I used to teach at Dallas Seminary, said, you're kind of the so what professor, because I was always looking for application when I would be teaching at Dallas Seminary, and don't do that much anymore. But even so, there were times when I would be at a church and I'd hear a great sermon and I'd walk out and say to my wife, it was a wonderful message. I have not a clue as to how to apply any of it. And I'm kind of good at that. That's kind of what people used to think of me as doing. So this idea of, first of all, help them really develop the tools necessary to get into God's Word. And then number 2, make the connections that sometimes are hard for us to make because it takes some thought, it takes some application, maybe experience from some of these godly women to help you understand how that begins to show up in your to-do list, how it shows up in your schedule, how it shows up on your phone day to day. So I just, again, want to commend people to consider going to the HeartStrong Faith Women's Conference. And I appreciate the fact that you've put that together. But let's talk about why I think this is also so important, because it does seem to me that women have always struggled with some of the places that they belong and all the rest, but it's become more complex because now you have women that are at home, you have women in the workforce, you have a cacophony of voices. And I think a lot of women are saying, what's my place in this world? Am I supposed to be home with my kids? Am I supposed to be out working? You've got a husband, you've got kids, you are a worker. You know exactly the fact that sometimes we need these conferences just so women can begin to hear from the Lord, because they're getting confused by all the mixed messages they're receiving from society.
That's right. That's right. And my own personal story, Kerby, is, 10 years ago, I was at an interesting place. I was on a big morning show in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, a big country music morning show. And essentially the Lord had really given me everything I had ever asked for. Now, my bucket list was pretty small, but I wanted to be married. I wanted to live in the suburbs. I wanted to have at least 2 healthy children. I wanted to sing on a praise and worship team at church. I wanted to be working in radio, and God had granted all of those things. And I found myself at this place of almost despair, because everything I had ever worked for and attained did not fulfill me the way that I thought it would. And so I had somewhat of a breaking point, and my husband and I were having a conversation one day, and he said, well, I think I know what's wrong with you. And I looked at him and I said, those are fighting words. You better. And he said,
poor Mike.
When I met you, I know, poor Mike. He said, you were always reading the Bible. You were always journaling about what you were reading. You were always telling me about the Bible study you were doing. And he said, and I haven't seen you do that in years. And he was right. We had 2 kids back to back 1 year apart, and I had just never really come up for air. And so I started journaling. I committed to myself that I would read scripture for 20 minutes a day and journal about it. And 20 minutes a day turned into 40, which turned into an hour. And pretty soon I couldn't wait to get my kids down for a nap so I could just spend all of that time in the scriptures. And what I discovered was that when you go to the scriptures and you're not looking for answers necessarily, and you're not looking for a quote to tweet, the Lord will meet you there, and the Lord will speak to you. And I believe it's in John's Gospel where Jesus says the Holy Spirit comes to teach and remind. And that was the point where my life started to take some shape. And I had never wanted to be a speaker. I had never wanted to write. I had never wanted to work in Christian radio. I was a Christian, but I had just never desired those things. And one day at a time, just by listening for the Lord's voice and by seeking him in the scriptures, he's taken me on this journey. And now the greatest passion of my heart is to see women come to know the living Christ through the word of God. And I say this all the time. As women, we want the plan. We want the blueprints. We want to know what's for dinner. We want to know who's going to be where and when. And we want to know the plan for our lives. And God's plan for each one of our lives is very simple. It's just that we would follow his son. But we won't follow someone we don't trust. And we can't trust someone we don't know. And we cannot know Christ apart from his word. And so if we don't have a living relationship with the Lord based on what he has already said in the scriptures, then really our spirituality is subject to all kinds of false teaching or popular thinking. And I think, Kerby, that's why we're seeing so many of these strange ideas catch fire and take off, because we are not grounded in the word ourselves. We can't claim to know what God is saying unless we are reading it first in his word, the scriptures.
Well, and again, we should be like the Bereans, examining the scriptures daily to see if what we hear is true. And it does seem to me, by the way, let me just mention, I haven't mentioned your website, because I think now people hearing this say, I want to get her to come speak at our church or something like that, loveserveshine.com. So that's another link that you can follow as well, because this is, I think, one of the great challenges in the 21st century. First of all, because you get all these different voices, some of which are true, some of which are not, some of which come from the church, some of which come from the secular world. Some of them come from our own assumptions of what it means to be a godly woman or a good wife or whatever that might be. And then more importantly, because we don't use the scriptures to evaluate some of those messages, we just get more confused. And like you said, we get some of these false ideas being promoted as well. So I need to take a break. We'll come back for just a little bit longer with Rebecca Carrell, because she's been willing to stay with us a little bit longer and get a little more perspective on that issue. And again, if you just happen to be joining us, we've been talking about the HeartStrong Faith Conference. And you can simply go to heartstrongfaith.com. We have a link there as well. And this is this weekend. So if you have not even heard about it till now, let me encourage you to do two things. Number one, go to the website and find out more about it. Number two, something I always encourage you to do is there's a video there for about 3 minutes long, and I would encourage you to watch the video. It has some of the highlights from last year. And then there's a share button on the upper right-hand corner. Click that and put it on your Facebook page or Twitter feed or something like that. That might educate someone else that might say, I didn't know there was a conference taking place this weekend. And that will be an opportunity for you to expand the message as well. And you might even want to send it by email to somebody that you know would really benefit from coming to the conference. So let's take a break. We will continue our conversation with Rebecca Carrell right after this.
There is no more dangerous time than when things are going well. Remember Elijah on Mount Carmel? Fire came down. There was no doubt who was God, but what happened next? He went from amazing faith to a time of great fear and depression. Many Christians have been very thankful a certain Democratic candidate for president was not the one to nominate 2 replacements for the Supreme Court. But as with Elijah, times of great victory are also times of great danger. Moments like this are not the time to take it easy. This is not the time to let our guard down. This is a time to double down on our work in the community, to serve and pray and plan and invest in a better future. This is the time to join Point of View's Truth Team 360 to make sure today's promising gains are not lost tomorrow. Show your commitment to our future by visiting pointofview.net/team or call 800-347-5151. Ask to join the Truth Team. Pointofview.net/team. and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
If you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212, or you simply sit back and listen. By the way, we also, of course, broadcast on Facebook Live, so you can leave a comment there. But we are talking for a little bit longer with Rebecca Carrell. And again, you perhaps are familiar with her morning talk show host on KCBI, as well as an author, conference speaker. We've been talking about the HeartStrong Faith Conference taking place this weekend, heartstrongfaith.com, as well as, of course, you can go to her website, loveserveshine.com. And Rebecca, back to this idea of getting into God's Word, if there's a theme that's run through the last couple of months here at Point of View, it's the need for discernment. As a matter of fact, in the next hour, we'll probably get into fake hate crimes. And in the past, when we talk about apologetics, world religions, whatever, there's just a need for Christians to develop discernment. And if you're not spending time in God's Word and using that as your grid to evaluate what you see, read, and hear, you're going to very, very easily be led astray because there are so many voices vying for our attention, whether in social media, whether on our television sets, whether it's websites or just the conversations we have. So I think it brings us back to why a conference like this and why good Bible study inside your church is absolutely essential.
I agree with you. And there's one thing that has really been troubling me the past maybe decade or so. And I think, Kerby, that we're seeing today within church walls, people who, in an attempt to love like Christ, are allowing culture to shape the way they approach the Scriptures instead of soaking themselves in the Scriptures and then allowing the Lord to shape the way we approach the culture. And so a lot has been just in the name of tolerance and in the name of love, we are steering so far off course. And unless we are in the Word, and my challenge is every day, my challenge is to stay in the Word every single day. Unless we're doing that, it's almost impossible not to get caught up in that cultural flow because it is so strong and it does look loving. But it's not God's way, and it's the way that ultimately can only lead to destruction.
One of the things that we have on our latest Outlook has to do with, of course, the transgender issue and impacts LGBT and all the rest. And, I understand, Rebecca, some of that because in the past, sometimes you've had some really legalistic churches that have been real strong on their biblical convictions, but very low on their biblical compassion. And so maybe there's almost been a pendulum spring now. So it says, well, I'm real high on my biblical compassion, but very low on my biblical convictions. I believe both need to be there. You need to speak the truth in love. And so, first of all, you have to be about truth. And where do you find truth? You find it in the Scriptures. Because right now we have a redefinition of truth in our society and our culture more than ever before. But you also need to do it in a loving way. And like you said, there, in the name of compassion, in the name of tolerance, we've allowed all sorts of things to be even preached from the pulpits of our various churches in a way that I think has been very harmful.
And what we can tend to forget is that compassion is not something the Lord has. Compassion is something the Lord is. I tell women, if you want to know who God is, allow him to introduce himself to you. And he does in Exodus 34:6, where he says, the Lord, the Lord. And then what word does he lead with? The compassionate and gracious God, slow to anger, abounding in love and faithfulness. And yet he loves his creation, his people, so much that he won't let them, stray so far. You can't have love unless you have a measure of wrath. It's just not possible. And so that's really my heart cry, I think, and I know it's something you're very passionate about as well, is yes, we must be speaking the truth, but if we're not wrapping that in love, then we're little more than a clanging bell, as Paul wrote in 1 Corinthians 13.
We'll go to 2 Corinthians 2, because here Paul says, he's tearing down strongholds and lofty thoughts raised up against the knowledge of God and taking every thought captive to the obedience of Christ. Now, in other passages, you've talked about the fact in Colossians that you shouldn't be taken captive by false philosophy. But here he's saying we should take every thought captive. And I think it's kind of a zero-sum game. If you aren't in the Word, Rebecca, and if you aren't really thinking biblical thoughts, then the society will take you captive. But what we should do is take every thought captive and think biblically about that and reject some of these false ideas that are being spread in the culture, but sometimes even in Christian media. And I've always encouraged our listeners to check out the articles that we post, to write in, to ask questions, back to our key word here, have some discernment, because we certainly need discernment more than ever in the 21st century.
We really do. We really do. And you better be careful, or I'm going to call you to come speak at the HeartStrong Faith Women's Conference.
Let me just for another couple of minutes get to another issue, because one of the themes that runs through Point of View is discernment. But there's another theme, and you will be familiar with that because it's the word serve, love, serve, shine. And that is something that, again, I want to maybe help some of the women that would come to the conference, but men and women listening right now. And that is, I run into people all the time, Rebecca, that simply say, well, I'm depressed, so you need to help me out, or I'm dealing with a lot of anxiety, you need to help me out, or, I'm dealing with a lot of guilt. Matter of fact, next hour, we're going to be talking with an individual that runs a pregnancy resource center, has called in before, and we're talking about, I run into women, sometimes say, because I've had an abortion, I just wallow in guilt. And I say, well, then you need to go out and serve. You need to go and actually, because probably the most effective person to speak to a abortion-minded woman would be somebody who's maybe been through an abortion. And they go, no, you don't understand. You gotta minister to me. I said, no, you got it wrong. If you want to get yourself healthy, go out and serve. And it seems to me that right now we have entirely too many people in the churches that say, you professional people up front, you're doing the work of ministry. We're just the audience. That's not a biblical idea at all, is it?
No, not at all. And I would say, too, that if you're not serving in some capacity, you're not anywhere close to living according to your potential or your purpose. We're all very familiar with the greatest commandment, love God. And then Jesus said, love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, and all your strength. And I think we tend to forget about the strength part. What does that look like? Well, God has equipped each one of us and wired us and allowed us to go through certain circumstances and experiences for the purpose of serving in that very capacity. We're like a racehorse not allowed to run if we're not serving in the area of our giftedness. And that is exactly, I believe, one of the reasons that I'm so passionate about putting the HeartStrong Faith Women's Bible Conference on, is because it was God's word that reached me. It was God's word that saved me. It's God's word today that sustains me. And so I want to pour all my attention and energy into doing the same for other women. But that's just another question that I hear a lot of. Well, I don't know what God wants me to do. I don't know what my purpose is. Well, your purpose is to glorify the Lord in the area where he's gifted you. And so serving is a huge piece of the way we love the Lord. We can't give Jesus a hug. We can't do that. We can't stand in front of him face to face and tell him thank you, but we can turn and we can serve others who are struggling with things that we've struggled with, or even that aren't. We can just serve in any kind of capacity. But that's when we're closest to the Lord, is when he is literally working in and through us. So I think that's a huge, huge piece of the story.
I think so, too. Need to take a break, but let me just mention, even as you're hearing that, you might say, well, I don't know what my spiritual gift is. And first of all, I'm really big on, as I've spoken many times before, pointing you to websites where you can kind of discern your spiritual gift. But don't sit there in neutral. Many times we discover our spiritual gifts by going out and serving. And as you serve, sometimes you'll have somebody say, you're really good at what you're doing. That might be really your gift, or that might be someplace where you really could begin to develop a ministry. And so sometimes there is this sense of, I got to have all the facts and figures. I've got to have all the theology down. I've got to be like Rebecca. I've got to get a master's degree at Dallas Theological Seminary before I can even pray in the women's ministry. No. God can use you even this day to go out there and make a difference. And oftentimes you will discover your gifts and abilities by serving. Many of the gifts I'm using now in my 60s, I discovered in my 30s and 40s, did not know that I had them. And those are things that come sometimes because you go and do ministry. And so, again, finding your purpose, finding your gift comes by serving. and an end of that sermon. So I'm going to take a break. When we come back, again, we'll spend just another couple minutes talking about what is available at the HeartStrong Faith Conference. Maybe some of you have had a chance to already hear about that, but I know people tune in and tune out. And if I have Rebecca for an hour, I'm going to keep her for an hour because she brings a lot of wisdom to this perspective, and you will hear from so many of the speakers how to study God's Word for yourself. Let's take a break. We'll continue our conversation right after this.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. When the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit declined to review a decision of that court that said that the cross-shaped Bladensburg World War I Veterans Memorial is unconstitutional, not all the judges agreed. Chief Judge Gregory noted his dissent. He said, quote, "Nearly a century ago, Maryland citizens, out of deep respect and gratitude, took on the daunting task of erecting a monument to mirror the measure of individual devotion and sacrifice these heroes had so nobly advanced. The panel majority says their effort violates the Constitution the soldiers fought to defend. I, respectfully, think otherwise." Judge Niemeyer said with some exasperation, quote, "Until this action was filed by persons who claimed to be offended by the presence of the monument, no complaint had been made about its presence," unquote. But Judge Wilkinson was poetic in his dissent. He wrote, quote, "The dead cannot speak for themselves, but may the living hear their silence. This memorial and this cross have stood for almost one full century. Life and change flow by the small park in the form of impatient cars and trucks. That is disturbance enough," unquote. He concluded simply noting that the park in which the memorial stands, quote, "may not be Arlington National Cemetery, but it is the next thing to it. I would let the cross remain and let those honored rest in peace," unquote. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
Hi, I'm Kelly Shackelford, President and Chief Counsel of First Liberty Institute. I hope you enjoyed this episode of First Liberty Briefing. You can learn more amazing stories about how everyday Americans are standing up and saving religious freedom. Just visit firstliberty.org. You'll be inspired, educated, and informed. Visit firstliberty.org right now.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back once again for a few more minutes. Let me just give you a program note. In the next hour on our national show, we're going to focus on a lot of different issues. First of all, I just alluded to the fact that we'll be talking about a pregnancy resource center. This is an individual who's called in before. We were so impressed with her. We'll talk about, again, what you can do to serve in some of these pregnancy centers, and she's got just a great view that I thought would be wonderful to share with you. Of course, we're also going to be talking about this idea of discernment. I love what one individual said, from Ralph Northam, who's the governor of Virginia, to Jussie Smollett, how Black History Month has been a total disaster. We'll get into this issue of discernment. Of course, we have some issues that we'll be talking about as well in terms of the president's emergency order. Is that constitutional? How to address that issue and fact check a couple of statements that have been made. A little bit later, for especially our listeners up in the Northeast and especially in the state of New York, we'll talk about Amazon deciding to pull its headquarters out of New York City and some of the criticism that Alexia Ocasio-Cortez is receiving, even from fellow Democrats like Representative Carolyn Maloney. So we got lots to cover. But again, if you just happen to tune in, we've been talking about the HeartStrong Faith Women's Bible Conference. You can go to heartstrongfaith.com. But I might suggest, Rebecca, a couple of other things. To scroll down, even if you cannot attend the conference, some people might already have an activity this weekend, there's a place where you can connect up, receive some of the latest updates and those kinds of things. But also, I thought I'd mention the sponsors that you have. One is, of course, Dallas Theological Seminary, but another one is Compassion. My wife and I have both through World Vision and Compassion sponsored children, and I think there'll be an opportunity for some of the women to attend and actually learn about that as well. True?
Oh, there sure will, and we're so grateful for, I think this is the second year in a row Compassion International has graciously sponsored the conference, and my family also has a couple kids, and this has been just a wonderful, wonderful experience. You know, Kerby, my kids are still pretty young, 11 and 12, in teaching them generosity and how God does not bless us to have, God blesses us to give. And so we're just so grateful for Compassion International.
Oh, I just thought I'd mention that real quickly because that's another benefit. But again, just real quickly before I let you go, talk about what they will experience, because you arrive on Friday. Get there before 7 p.m., by the way. I might hasten to add that. 7 to 9:45, and then Saturday, 9 to 3:30. But this is a chance for you to meet some of these women, to get your picture taken with them, to get them to autograph those books that they may have written, to really get to know them, and just, in a sense, have a party. And I've already suggested to all of you, go to the website, heartstrongfaith.com. The video is about 3+ minutes long. And watch it, and then share it with somebody, and you'll maximize the impact that it will have. But talk about what what women will actually experience when they arrive.
Yes, well, the staff and the volunteers are wonderful, so we anticipate that you'll feel right at home the second you get there. We're very, very excited about the speaker lineup this year. Sheila Walsh is one of our speakers. About 1,500 women twice a month take Jada Edwards' Bible study. Right now she's currently teaching through Galatians, and she's going to be teaching. Kat Armstrong is a graduate of Dallas Theological Seminary, and Bianca Olthoff has traveled with Christine Kane on her Propel Women tour. So she's a very dynamic seminary-trained speaker. I think what I'm most excited about are the theological legs that each of the speakers have, because really the goal, Kerby, is not to inspire, although I am certain they're going to leave inspired. The goal isn't to entertain, although some of these women are hilarious. The goal really is to educate, equip, and empower each woman there to gain, to get the most out of her own personal Bible study, reading and studying, so that she doesn't have to kind of exist from Bible study to Bible study, filling in someone else's blanks, but so that she can really encounter Christ on her own in the Scriptures by herself, which is where I always believe the deepest ministry takes place, where it's just you and the Lord.
Certainly agree with that. Let me also mention as well, there's going to be a worship time. There's going to be a prayer time. There are going to be some displays. So talk about some of the other things in addition to the outstanding teaching that they will receive.
Free coffee, because that was
I love that.
I said you can't have a women's conference and not have coffee. So we also have photo booths and things like that, meet and greets where all of the speakers will be at their table at certain designated times, so that the women can meet the speakers and get their books autographed. One of the things that I asked of the speakers this year was to make yourself accessible, and all of them very graciously agreed to do that. So they really want to meet you and encourage you in your own study. They want to share what the Lord has taught them, and they want to equip you to be able to do this work on your own. So I was very grateful that each of the speakers agreed to that. And it's just going to be a lot of fun, a lot of fellowship. There are breakout sessions to choose from. and we'll wrap everything up by 3:30 on Saturday.
Well, again, you know that when you're doing a morning show, sometimes you got maybe 3 minutes to try to emphasize that. I wanted to give you an hour, and I certainly appreciate your perspectives.
Thank you.
And see if we can do this again, because I do appreciate your heart for ministry, but also the depth in which you want to study God's Word and encourage other women to do the same. We need more of that. We need more Rebecca Carrells, and so that's why I wanted to have a little bit more time with you today here on Point of View, and I hope we can do it again sometime soon.
Anytime. And Kerby, thank you. It's a tremendous honor. Really appreciate you.
We, again, want to encourage you to find out a little bit more. Go to, again, heartstrongfaith.com. And if you want to know more about Rebecca, go to loveserveshine.com. Real easy to find it. And, again, I think we have most of that up there. If you find yourself saying, I'd like to follow her on Facebook or Twitter, again, we have those links to all of that as well on pointofview.net. And so as you go there, I just hope you'll take the time to find out a little bit more. Let me, just before we take a break, mention that we also are going to Israel in the fall, and this will be October 18th to the 30th. Actually, we're going to both Israel and to Rome, so you'll have a chance to see where Jesus walked and also where Paul walked and where eventually he ended his life. And so if you have not asked for a brochure or clicked on the button, let me encourage you to do so. There's a button there that says Find Out More. Each day I get a little more of an update on a few other people that have signed up, and we try to make it fairly small. There's only 2 buses, and we're starting to fill up that first bus. So, again, it's going to be important for you, if you're really interested, to put down your deposit. Number 2, I want to maybe challenge some of you that say, well, I've always wanted to go to Israel, but it's just too expensive for me. I want you to check ours out, because especially if you just go to Israel, Rome is a little more expensive for all sorts of reasons. But if you can go to just Israel or Israel and Rome, you will find, and people have been shocked. As a matter of fact, I had somebody the other day that had been doing a tour, and he said, how in the world do you make it so inexpensive? And there are some very good reasons for it, not the least of which we don't bring a big entourage. Number 2, when we are in the Sea of Galilee, we go to a kibbutz, which is just like being at like Pine Cove or something like that, but it keeps the cost a little bit down. We don't go to the 5-star hotels. We go to the 4-star hotels. We try to make it inexpensive, because one of the reasons I found that many people have never gone to Israel, because they say it's just too expensive. And so this is about as inexpensive as we can make it. The price is eventually going to go up in the future. And so I want you to check it out, and simply go to the website, pointofview.net. If you don't have access to that, you can give us a call on our call-in line, or any line. Actually, you could even use the line for those individuals that want to contact the ministry, 800-347-5151. We'll send you a brochure. And I want you to check it out, and maybe think about inviting a friend so that you could experience Israel, or Israel and Rome, with another family or another group in your church. So again, that is available on the website, pointofview.net. We come back, we're going to talk about, first of all, pregnancy resource centers, but all sorts of issues in the news. We've got a lot to cover. This is going to be a busy week because, matter of fact, even tomorrow we have former Congresswoman Linda Smith about sexual trafficking and many other guests. So let's take a break. We'll be back with more right after this.
The leader looked around the table, motioning to the older men. He said, "You're here to remind us how faithful God has been in the past. Now, you middle-aged guys, you keep us focused on what God is doing right now. Make sure we don't stop. And you younger guys, keep us looking forward. Imagine what God wants us to be doing in the years to come." There's a lot of wisdom there. We have to be thankful for the past, focused on the present, and mindful to plan for a great future. Many listeners have made bold moves to partner with Point of View Radio and accomplish great things for more than 45 years. But as we look around, we do see many positive things, and I think we can all admit there's a lot more to be done. It's time to think about your next bold move, what you can do to invest for our nation's future. Be thinking about that. If you have an answer now, don't wait. Make your next bold move now. Give online at pointofview.net or call 800-347-5151. It's our future. The time is now. Pointofview.net and 1-800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kerby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of View, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I'm just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Happy President's Day. We certainly are appreciative of the fact that you have decided to join us today. This is going to be a very busy week. We're going to be talking about a lot of different issues. Matter of fact, the next 2 hours, we're going to be talking about a lot of different issues. Just a minute, we're going to focus on what you can do at your local pregnancy resource center by talking with an individual that has done so. But a little bit later this hour, and certainly next hour, we're going to get into something that I've really wanted to talk about, but now it's become more obvious that we are dealing with probably another fake hate crime. But I really want to look at it more from not what an individual did, Jussie Smollett, but how the media covered it and how we, again, need to develop discernment. But it has been a difficult month, as Stereo Williams put it the other day, from Ralph Northam, who, by the way, is the governor of Virginia, to Jussie Smollett, how Black History Month has been a total disaster. So we'll get into some of that about so-called fake hate crimes. We've posted one article, Let's Chill About Hate Crimes. We're going to bring a lot more to the table about that. Then also, I do want to spend just a few minutes, and maybe some very extensive time, we'll see how the conversations go, talking about this idea of a national emergency. Can a president declare a national emergency? Well, we have more than 30 that actually have, so I posted some fact checks on that. But is there really a justification for using a national emergency by the current president to build the wall? So we'll get into some of those issues this next 2 hours. And then I did want to, if we have time, focus a little bit of attention on the really kind of the feedback and even some of the pushback against the decision by Amazon to withdraw from New York City. You have, of course, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez saying that New Yorkers deserve dignified jobs. I looked it up. Some of these jobs would pay $150,000 a year. That's pretty dignified. You have her fellow Democrat, Carolyn Maloney, who actually would be in the district where that Amazon headquarters would have been, saying, you know, we as Democrats, we used to protest wars. Now we're protesting jobs. So we're going to get into some of those issues as well. There are going to be a lot of things that we certainly want to spend some time talking about. But we thought it would be good for just a minute to start off by talking about these pregnancy resource centers. If you've listened to the program, every once in a while, you know that we have been really impressed with an individual by the name of Monica who's called in. And so Monica Martinez now joins us live. She is a volunteer, well, first started as a volunteer and then eventually became the director of client services at the Pregnancy Resource Center in Tracy, California. She's also been a homeschooling mom, now has 2 adult daughters, but we thought it would be good just to hear a little bit more from her, because I really want to encourage those of you that have pro-life convictions to think about what you might do to support your local pregnancy center. So, Monica, thank you for joining us today here on Point of View.
Thank you for having me, Kerby.
I've appreciated you calling in the past, which is something we don't do too often, but Steve said, well, let me see if I can get your phone number and get you on for a segment or two. So this is, you're not necessarily used to always being on a national radio program, but because we felt that you were so articulate, I thought it would be good to use you to maybe encourage others to be involved. And so take us back, was it about 8 years ago when you decided to volunteer at your pregnancy center?
I did, Kerby. It was a little over 8 years ago, but actually my story begins even before that. It was in 2004, and I'm sure, Kerby, you remember the May Day for Marriage rally that was held on the National Mall in Washington, D.C. in 2004. It was a rally that was, like I said, it was in October of 2004, and Christian leaders from all across the nation, such as Ken Hutcherson and Dr. Dobson, Chuck Colson, and Graham Lotz, Dennis Rainey, just to name a few, rallied together with tens of thousands of people from all over the U.S. to make a stand for marriage. My husband and I flew from Northern California to Washington, D.C. to volunteer at this event, and it was there on a very cold October morning as we were preparing for this event that I saw something, Kerby, that I had never seen before in my entire life. As my husband and I were helping set up, I saw a truck driving down Madison Drive right along the National Mall, pulling a mobile billboard. It was on this billboard that I saw a picture of an aborted baby.
Wow.
And that billboard stopped me in my tracks. And it was then at that moment that the Lord began to speak to my heart in regards to my involvement in the pro-life movement. I happened to be a part of that very first generation to grow up in an abortion-on-demand society. I knew abortion was legal, and although I had always considered myself pro-life, the truth was I knew very little about what was going on in our country, in my state, and in particular in my city regarding abortion. Your show, Kerby, directed me to ministries and books and conferences and more rallies that helped me gain a further understanding of the pro-life position and my role in it.
Well, again, I think it's just a good illustration of why we do what we do here. As my wife will probably tell you, I probably speak at more Pregnancy Resource Center banquets than anything else. Never been to the one in Tracy yet, but I've been to many around the country and certainly around the state of Texas where, of course, we broadcast from. But again, I have such a heart for it, number one, because we want to save the babies, but also it's just been amazing. It's such an incredible evangelistic outreach as well because so many young women and even their boyfriends or husbands become Christians in the midst of it. So when you got involved, you were like a lot of individuals that said, you know, I can sit on the sidelines or I need to roll up my sleeves and get involved. And you probably, as a volunteer, said, I don't know too much about this. But the good news is if you volunteer at your local pregnancy center, they probably can train you and really equip you to be more effective.
Yes, absolutely. That is true. In fact, that is part of my role as a director of client services. I train individuals who are interested in learning more about the pro-life position and volunteering at local pregnancy centers so that they could be further equipped to speak to an individual that walks through these doors. And I can tell you, Kerby, 98% of the time when someone approaches me and tells me, Monica, I would really like to serve, I want to help in this area, but I don't know what to do. I don't know where to start. I don't know enough information. And that's exactly the individual that I like to work with in particular because those are the individuals that have the heart for the ministry, the heart for helping individuals who find themselves in those very difficult circumstances of an unplanned pregnancy. So I encourage people who do have that desire to help at a local pregnancy center to give them a call because there is training available and there is a lot of encouragement that goes on with that training.
I might just mention, too, that we do have a link to your particular Pregnancy Resource Center. But, of course, one of the things they can also do is go to CareNet or even just type in Pregnancy Resource Center near me. And it's amazing. Google will help you find that. And those are some places where you can get involved. So let's take a break. We come back. I want to talk a little bit more about that because what does that entail and what can people do? Because you are such a great advocate for this. And, again, we were willing to put you on the spot just to say, okay, you're not a national spokesperson for this, but in some respects, we just appreciated your heart and wanted to give you a chance to, again, encourage others to get involved in their local community. And so when we come back, we'll talk about some of that. You will probably find out very quickly, because I have found out over the years that oftentimes pregnancy resource centers are overworked and underfunded. And so here's a place for your time, your talent, and even your treasure. So I hope you get involved in some of these. And we'll continue our conversation with Monica Martinez. And then a little bit later, we have a lot more to cover in the news. We will do that right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
The political drama in Virginia might just be a preview of a wild, contentious Democratic primary. In fact, Rich Lowry believes we might be seeing the beginning of the first woke primary. To be woke is to be alert and sensitive to any injustice, whether real or perceived. A governor had an image of someone in blackface in his medical school yearbook. That apparently was enough to call for his resignation. Democrats in Virginia faced a growing problem. The publication of an image in blackface in the governor's yearbook was followed by an admission from the attorney general that he had used blackface as well. All the while, accusations were swirling around the lieutenant governor, who was accused of sexual assault. We've been told to believe all women. If so, then he would have to go as well. The controversy in Virginia is merely a preview of a woke primary where any mistake or misjudgment, even in the distant past, can be disqualifying. Any misstep will be viewed through the most hostile lens from a radicalized base of Democratic voters. Rich Lowry concludes the Democrat nomination battle might as well be fought on the campus of Oberlin College and officiated by the Director of Office of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. White male candidates don't stand a chance. Senator Elizabeth Warren has been criticized for pretending to be a Native American and forced to apologize. Senator Kirsten Gillibrand was confronted on television because a number of years ago she used the term illegal alien. She said she was embarrassed and forced to apologize for a term that was in common usage at the time. And even Senator Kamala Harris has been criticized because she was once a prosecutor. This may be the most contentious and controversial primary season we've ever seen in America. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
From roadside attractions, Run the Race. Two brothers share an unbreakable bond, but life's unexpected adversities put their future in question. Run the Race, rated PG, in theaters February 22nd.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Monica Martinez with us for a few more minutes. By the way, if you'd like to join us, we're going to move on to other topics, but if you have a comment about pregnancy resource centers or maybe even like to talk about the one that you're involved with, we'd love to hear from you. 1-800-351-1212. And again, working as the Director of Client Services at the Pregnancy Resource Center in Tracy, California. For just a minute, Monica, maybe we could help people understand your community. I know it. My father used to call on doctors in Tracy, California. Matter of fact, my aunt has up until recently lived in Turlock, California, so I know where that is. I got lots of friends in Stockton and Lodi and places like that. But most of the listeners in this country are listening right now are on other parts of the country. So what is the community like where you are actually doing your ministry?
Tracy is a smaller community that sits right between the Bay Area, the San Francisco Bay Area, and the Sacramento area. And so we're kind of sandwiched in between those two locations. A lot of traffic comes through Tracy.
And again, these are people that you might run into, women in particular, that may be, abortion-minded. They may feel like they have a crisis pregnancy and maybe be convinced that the only answer to their, quote, problem is an abortion. So what are some of the women, what kind of values and what kind of experiences do you run into when they walk in that door?
Well, oftentimes when a woman, and when I say woman, Kerby, you and I both know it's women of all ages. I have had opportunities to sit down and speak with girls as young as 11 and women in their late 40s, early 50s, walking in because they find themselves with an unplanned pregnancy. And so we say the woman, you and I, because that's what we just think naturally, but it is girls as young as 11 years old in my personal experience. So these individuals are out there. They find themselves extremely terrified with an unplanned pregnancy, and they find themselves walking into a place like the Pregnancy Help Center or a resource center throughout communities throughout our country, wanting answers to their very difficult questions. Oftentimes, they will find themselves thinking that they've walked into an abortion clinic because they just don't know. Mm-hmm. And that is an opportunity that we have to encourage these individuals towards life, encourage them with the reality and the facts of abortion in a loving, compassionate way.
Well, and one of the things that you alluded to just a couple of minutes ago is when you saw that billboard coming by, being towed, you said, is that what an abortion is? And I found that a lot of, especially young girls, don't know what that is, what it entails, the impact it's going to have on their life. I found that even recently they showed an animation of an abortion at a church not far from where I'm broadcasting, which is one that had done many conferences on their various issues. There were still people walking out saying, I had no idea that's what an abortion actually entailed. So in some respects, you are giving them information. And even though people on the pro-abortion side call themselves pro-choice, they really only given them one choice. And what you're trying to do is help them make a rational decision in the midst of some incredible emotional distress and maybe even pressure they're receiving from their parents or their boyfriend. True?
It's absolutely true. They come in with overwhelming feelings of confusion and doubt and not knowing the facts. And you're right, Kerby, the majority of individuals do not know the facts of an abortion. And like you mentioned, these images, they definitely are profound. That's not necessarily what we do, Kerby. We don't show these images to an individual. That is not the approach. We believe that is not that's not an effective approach at all. It's simply simply showing and explaining what I like to say, the facts of fetal development. If we can just focus on the reality and the facts, Kerby, of an unborn child being developed, that speaks volumes to an individual who is perhaps considering an abortion. The fact that at 21 days we know the heartbeat can be detected, the fact that at 12 weeks, which is a stage where many abortions are performed during that, late first trimester, early into the second trimester, that so much development is happening with an unborn baby. The fingers, the toes, the eyes, the ears, the nose, the mouth, all of that is developing and very significantly seen via ultrasound at 12 weeks is truly astonishing. Many, many women, girls, women do not know that this is happening during that stage of development.
Yes, and again, that's to me one of the greatest tools. First of all, in the old days, since I'm the old guy around the table here, remember when we just had the plastic models, but that still helped them understand. But now with sonograms, ultrasound, things like that, how many times have I heard stories as I've been to these various banquets or done other interviews where somebody will say, I hear a heartbeat. Yes, you do. Well, it's alive. I mean, they didn't say that at the Planned Parenthood clinic. No, they didn't. But that's another benefit because in some respects, ultrasound has provided a window to the womb. And young women that had never really understood the whole issue of development of the baby inside the womb now understand this is my baby. This is not a product of conception. And so this is just why I'm so excited about some of these newer tools and technologies that a lot of these pregnancy resource centers have.
It's true. And now with the advancements in 3D technology, with 3D ultrasounds, Kerby, it is amazing the window to the womb that we have today. And it truly is a game changer. I have been, privileged to stand next to these individuals as they're having these ultrasounds and to see their light, the lights in their eyes the expressions on their face just become surprisingly, aware of what they're seeing it's really encouraging. But to know that ultrasounds are changing the game in the pro-life movement. And I always encourage individuals to get an ultrasound as soon as possible. We offer free ultrasounds. Pregnancy centers across the country offer ultrasounds at no cost to the client, which is, just another benefit of supporting a local pregnancy center, because they can't do that without the local support of their communities. Kerby, as you know, they need volunteer nurses, doctors, individuals that can help with these ultrasounds. It's very, very important because it does change the game in the life of a woman.
Well, you can maybe pick up a few more volunteers here today. And the first is that if you, first of all, as you just alluded to and mentioned, if you have a medical background, maybe you're a doctor already, obstetrician or gynecologist, or you have a nursing background, or maybe you're a physician's assistant or something like that, certainly connect up with your local pregnancy resource center. But if you say, look, I don't have a medical background, I'm really not even sure what to say, the good news is, as you just pointed out a minute ago, Monica, you can be trained, and you might end up eventually becoming the director of client services like you were. You might end up actually counseling with individuals. You might say, I'm not real good at talking with people, but I do know how to run computers, or I certainly could collect diapers, or there's just all sorts of ways in which people can get involved, right?
There are, Kerby. There are women walk in sometimes thinking that they have no support. How can they possibly carry a baby to term and continue to parent a baby with limited resources, or none at all is what they're thinking. But that's exactly why pregnancy centers exist, not only to encourage an individual towards life, an individual and her boyfriend or husband and family towards life, but also to encourage them with material items such as maternity clothes and diapers and baby clothes, anything that individual might need for that baby. Pregnancy centers, they can help with that. They encourage these individuals with those material items. And volunteers can do, like you said, Kerby, all kinds of things to support their local pregnancy centers. First and foremost, prayer. Pray for your local pregnancy centers. Encourage them. Give them a call. Let them know you're praying for them. That is just so encouraging to all of us in the ministry. But also with things such as material items, perhaps being able to help with clerical work, many, many things like that pregnancy centers need support with.
Very good. Monica, appreciate you giving us some time today. Of course, I'm sure you'll be calling in from time to time as we focus on various issues, but thank you for letting us put you on for a few minutes and learn a little bit more about what is happening at your Pregnancy Resource Center, and hopefully mobilizing a few other people to get involved in their local community as well. So thank you for joining us today here on Point of View.
Thank you, Kerby, for the opportunity, and perhaps you can come speak at one of our banquets in the future.
Glad to do it. Let's take a break. When we come back, we are getting a few phone calls, and if you want to address the issue of life and abortion, certainly the case. We're going to get back to some of the other issues as well. What about this issue of hate crimes and some of these fake hate crimes? I certainly don't know all the details yet of Jussie Smollett, but I think we have a pretty good idea, so we'll come back and talk about that right after this.
Roadside Attractions presents Run the Race. Two brothers share an unbreakable bond, but life's unexpected adversities put their future in question.
It's all part of his plan, right?
God does love you. He loves you like crazy.
From executive producers Tim Tebow and Robbie Tebow, Run the Race. Rated PG. Parental guidance suggested. In theaters February 22nd. More information is available at runtheracemovie.com.
Jesus said you could find a person's heart by where they invest their money. We at Point of View could not be more thankful that so many demonstrate a love for truth and for this nation by investing in our common mission. Of course, the reality is our team, our truth team, is a small percentage of those who listen. And right now, as they say in sports, we could use a deeper bench. For those who have given, thank you. And if you haven't made that step yet, take one now. Go to pointofview.net/team or call 800-347-5151. Show your heart for our future. Pointofview.net/team and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Back once again, if you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. First article here that we have on the website, Let's Chill About Hate Crimes, which we'll get to in just a minute. And again, a lot of this has to do with some of the allegations made by Jussie Smollett, which turn out apparently not to be true. We'll get into those details in just a minute. But since we had a moment to talk about the subject of pro-life centers and especially pregnancy resource centers, I thought I'd stay on that topic for another few minutes with some of our phone calls. So we'll go to the state of Texas first. Lisa, thank you for joining us today here on Point of View.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. I just wanted to share, I was a volunteer at a pregnancy testing center at the Rio Grande Valley, and they do a wonderful job. It was something that God put the desire of that, to do that kind of ministry in my heart. So it started as they visited our church and asked for volunteers. And so the training was wonderful, and we worked as a group and supported each other. My first case was a young lady that came in, and I did the pregnancy test, and yes, she was pregnant. And basically, we just educated her on the options that she had, and that included about abortion, adoption, and so forth. And I asked her if I could pray with her, and she said, yes, of course. And we didn't get an answer from her, but somehow in my heart I knew we'd see her again and we'd hear about what she had decided. And sure enough, she went and got an OBGYN, and they did a pregnancy test and confirmed it. But the doctor she chose, unfortunately, told her that the baby had Down syndrome and scared her to death and gave her an option of abortion, get rid of it. And so anyway, she returned to us, which was a miracle. And I know that God brought her back to us. We all talked with her, and we got to see that little baby girl born. And that little girl, the last time I saw her, she was 4 years old, beautiful. And so, woohoo, pregnancy testing centers, go for it. We need more and more volunteers. The only reason I haven't done it for a while is I lost my son in Iraq. So I pulled back a little bit, but I'm 60 years old now. And when I heard this, I thought, man, you guys got to hear this wonderful story. Not all of them turned out that way, but most of them did. Praise God. Thank you.
Will, thank you for sharing your testimony. Thank you for taking the time to call in today. And I just so appreciate those of you that work on what I consider kind of the front lines, the pregnancy resource centers, as well as those of you on the front lines really trying to convince women not to go into an abortion clinic. By the way, we're going to be doing some very significant promotion of the new movie coming out called Unplanned. And that is, of course, the story of Abby Johnson. So we'll talk about that as well. Let me take at least one other call here before we move into another topic. And, of course, all the way through, if you have some other things you want to add to the conversation, you can do so. We'll head up to the state of Maine this time. Bob, what would you like to add to our conversation today?
Thank you. I picked up my perception that there is a movement, perhaps worldwide, to create a manufactured measles crisis, so that they can solidify and spread the use of the measles vaccine, which is made with aborted baby cells. And also, I think that they're targeting specific countries, particularly I've heard mention the Philippines, which is a Catholic country that is basically pro-life. So I won't elaborate further.
Well, let me check it out. And you've given us another lead, which I can follow up on. I have been to the Philippines before, speaking at Word of Life, and I'll check it out and see what we can find out. Let me just maybe it's about time to get on to the next issue. And I've really been holding off on this, but if you're not familiar, we are, I think, pretty much convinced now that the allegations, the report that came from January 29th, from Jussie Smollett is inaccurate. I want to spend more time talking about the way the media covered it and the need for us to have discernment. He's still arguing that he's been a victim and the police are still treating it that way. But if you're not familiar with the story, it's a pretty simple one, and that is, of course, he is an actor on the TV show Empire. And on the 29th, when the temperature was -9 degrees in Chicago, he claims that he was jumped by some white guys wearing MAGA hats, that's Make America Great hats, said some things to him, welcomed him to Trump country, put a rope around his neck, on and on and on. And so there's all sorts of allegations that he made. Even as it was reported, I remember when it was reported, we were watching it, and somebody said, "Oh, that's incredible." And I, maybe in a cynical moment, said, "I hope it's true, because I got a feeling that it doesn't sound right." And you might say, well, why have you become so cynical? Well, maybe 40 years of radio is one reason, but I have in front of me here columns that I've had come out in 2016 on false stories, 2017 on fake hate crimes, others on fake hate crime hoaxes. You can actually type in fake hate crimes or something like that on our website and find that I have done commentaries for literally years. There are even whole websites called fake hate crimes. And does that mean that all of these are fake? No, of course not. But it does mean that sometimes when you have something in this case that didn't quite fit, there were some really important questions that I would expect people in the media to ask. Of course, now, if you're not familiar, the Chicago detectives have actually found the two brothers. Interestingly enough, after they were involved in this alleged crime, that's what I'm going to call it now, or this hoax, they left the country. But when they returned, they were able to then, of course, get a search warrant, and they found ropes, masks, bleach in their apartment, and everything began to come together, as I suspect many people would have had in the first place. Now, the piece that I've posted here by Kyle Smith points out the fact that from the very beginning, it was accepted in an uncritical way. The New York Times, which oftentimes tends to be fairly careful about what they said, I love what Kyle Smith said. The Times would have been on firm ground if they simply added 6 letters between the words empire and was attacked. In other words, says he. In other words, says he was attacked. In other words, that would say, well, this is his claim, because you know so often how we go out of our way, oftentimes in the mainstream press and in the conservative press and in even Christian media, to sometimes say allegedly, claims to whatever. But this was so fitting the narrative of what people wanted that even the New York Times, which oftentimes is known to be a little bit more careful about how it words their various statements, simply took what Jussie Smollett said as true on its face, which then, of course, led to all the kind of reaction that we have seen. Cory Booker, for example, said the vicious attack on Jussie Smollett was an attempted modern-day lynching. Joe Biden, what happened today to Jussie Smollett must never be tolerated in this country and must stand up and demand that we no longer give this hate safe harbor, that homophobia and racism have no place on our streets and in our hearts. Kamala Harris, this was an attempted modern-day lynching. No one should have to fear for their life because of their sexuality or color of their skin. We must confront this hate. And, of course, you know, you end up with all the kinds of claims and comments being made. Well, as it now looks like it is unfolding, we'll all wait to see how many of those people that made such strong statements are willing to come back and maybe clarify them. But after the break, I do want to talk about 5 good reasons that at least Carl Jackson put together as to why you might have been a little bit hesitant about jumping to some of those conclusions. And then in the next hour, I do want to remind us of the incredible number of examples that have surfaced over these years of fake hate crimes, which, first of all, cause those individuals that maybe were in one way or another victim of a crime to not be believed. Number 2, just stir up even more kind of sense that we live in a racist, homophobic, Islamophobic society, and there are major actions that need to be taken in order to begin to address this systemic hate in America. which may or may not necessarily be the case. And so I do want to kind of address those issues. But most importantly, even now, seeing some of the people in the media saying, oh, well, it had to happen sometime. And I'm like, yes, it's been happening for some time, and nobody's really been paying attention. We can look at some of these national examples that have unfolded. We can look at what has been happening in some of these local communities. The Duke lacrosse case, the UVA supposed rape in there. How about the Covington kids just a little over a month ago? There are some times when waiting and being careful before you make some statements makes a great deal of sense. We'll take a break. Love to get your comments. 1-800-351-1212. We'll be right back.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. When the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit declined to review a decision of that court that said that the cross-shaped Bladensburg World War I Veterans Memorial is unconstitutional, not all the judges agreed. Chief Judge Gregory noted his dissent. He said, quote, nearly a century ago, Maryland citizens, out of deep respect and gratitude, took on the daunting task of erecting a monument to mirror the measure of individual devotion and sacrifice these heroes had so nobly advanced. The panel majority says their effort violates the Constitution the soldiers fought to defend. I, respectfully, think otherwise. Judge Niemeyer said with some exasperation, quote, until this action was filed by persons who claimed to be offended by the presence of the monument, no complaint had been made about its presence, unquote. But Judge Wilkinson was poetic in his dissent. He wrote, quote, the dead cannot speak for themselves, but may the living hear their silence. This memorial and this cross have stood for almost one full century. Life and change flow by the small park in the form of impatient cars and trucks. That is disturbance enough, unquote. He concluded simply noting that the park in which the memorial stands, quote, may not be Arlington National Cemetery, but it is the next thing to it. I would let the cross remain and let those honored rest in peace, unquote. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
Hi, I'm Kelly Shackelford, President and Chief Counsel of First Liberty Institute. I hope you enjoyed this episode of First Liberty Briefing. You can learn more amazing stories about how everyday Americans are standing up and saving religious freedom. Just visit firstliberty.org. You'll be inspired, educated, and informed. Visit firstliberty.org right now.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
One of the things we talk about so often here on Point of View is the need for us to have discernment and to sometimes withhold judgment. Have we seen a few examples, and I'm going to give some of those later because a good piece even came out today by Robert Knight about all the reaction of the Covington teens in the Make America Great hats, and how in some cases the media just jumps to conclusions that are completely unwarranted. But this particular case from the very beginning raised a lot of questions for many of us, and I've waited till now to say something about them. But let me just quote from Carl Jackson, because his piece, I think, was good. What black man in California, one of the most liberal cities in all of America, is attacked in the middle of the night because he's black or gay? It would be different if he were robbed for money or gangsters mistook him for someone else. That has happened, of course. That wasn't the case. Additionally, on the night of the attack, temperatures were well below freezing. At one point, they were minus 9 degrees. Wouldn't he have been bundled up? I wouldn't recognize the guy on a red carpet, let alone an Arctic blizzard. And how is the attacker going to target him specifically because of his skin color and lifestyle? I mean, there were just all sorts of things, not the least of which is they had MAGA hats, Make America Great hats. He was just conveniently on the phone at the time with somebody. And again, all that could happen. But there were just a lot of really good questions that surfaced with the initial report. But then Carl Jackson goes on and mentions 5 takeaways. First of all, political correctness forbade us from actually calling out the issue. If the roles were reversed, imagine that you maybe had a debate with a leading Democratic contender and somebody with the National Rifle Association. Just think about this for a minute, maybe Dana Lash. And then she reports that somebody shot twice through the window of her home. I think some people would say, well, did they follow you home? How do they even know where you live? The first thing police are going to do is, can we look at all your guns to see if the ballistics on any of these bullet holes here and of the bullets that we've recovered match any of your guns, making us wonder whether you shot the windows out? I mean, there are all sorts of questions you'd obviously ask. You know as well as I do. In law enforcement, same thing. If a wife goes missing and we don't know where the husband was, who's your first suspect? You know, we know how that goes. But in this particular case, anybody that raised questions, and I did find a tweet, for example, by Michelle Malkin just raising one of the questions that was raised by J.C. Smollett. She was just vilified for that because political correctness said, yep, you know, he's black, he's gay, can't talk about it, can't ask any of the kinds of questions that even more recently we were asking of sort of Brett Kavanaugh, Dr. Ford. You know, does the story match up? Those are important questions and things. Number 2, he said the media wanted the story to be true, and I just gave you an example a minute ago of the New York Times, which oftentimes is very careful about the way they word things, but this fit the narrative only too well. So again, the jump in there was again part of that. Number 3, Democrats wanted this story to be true, because, again, that provides some of the victimology and things of that nature. And then I loved his other 2 points. Jesse Smollett isn't a good guy because just think about this. This could have, as he says, could have even started a race riot or something like that. Glad that it didn't. But nevertheless, just a couple of key points on that. And in just a minute, I want to get into some of the facts and figures about the so-called hate crimes and the number, because that has obviously been inflated as well. But let's take some phone calls to give you a chance to join the conversation. 1-800-351-1212. And Terry in North Carolina, what's your point of view? Terry, you with us?
Yes. My point of view is, first of all, I wish we would do away with the term Democrat and Republican, because it's division. That's dividing the country, and the Bible plainly states that a house divided is soon going to fall. So we have to get away from. We have to get somebody in the office that have the standards and believe what the Christian people believe. And with what happened to Justice Smollett, you know, at first, you know, me as a black person, I could see there's something that wasn't right with that. It's just like something just not right with it.
Yeah, it didn't pass this, the straight face test. I agree with you. Go ahead.
Right, but however, we have a leader. And we can't place all the blame on the leader, but it seems to me the country has become more divided over the last couple of years, and people have become more bold. So the media I don't think the media wanted the story to be true, and maybe perhaps they did want it to be true. And some people does want some things to be true because they want it to be a reflection on the leader. However, we have to examine, the police should have did a better investigation and, not put it out there and just, worked on it for a minute and then talked about it. Because, what Justice Smollett did is not helping our situation because they are homophobia and, African Americans being attacked and Muslims being attacked in this country. However, that doesn't help when you come out and you pretend that something has happened to you and it hasn't happened to you, because now if it really happens to somebody, then we're going to become skeptical about whether it's true or not.
There you go. And again, I said before, when everybody's called a racist, then nobody's a racist. If everybody's Hitler, then nobody's Hitler. And in some respects, you've done more harm than good, because we recognize there are some attacks, and we can point to some of those. And I'm going to, just a little bit later, give you some of the facts and figures on the number of hate crimes. What's kind of intriguing about that is it actually has dropped. But back to your point about polarization, there's pretty good evidence that about midway through Barack Obama's administration, polarization began to develop, I think in part because of some of the police shootings and things like that and the back and forth. And then, of course, it's continued on with this president. And I would love to bring America together, but you don't bring America together when you have these false stories. And again, Stereo Williams, I love his line. It's probably the best line of the day. Between Ralph Northam in Virginia, the governor, and Jesse Smollett, this has made Black History Month probably a total disaster. But let me, if I can, take a break. And then if we can, take a few more phone calls, give you some kind of the facts and figures to maybe help us understand that even though we are told that hate crimes are up, even if you use the most extreme example from the first full year of the Trump administration, since those are the ones I have in front of me here, round numbers, it's still, even when you count all the, because they even in their count like graffiti on a garage wall or on a wall or a garage door, which in some cases turn out to be fake hate crimes too. Even when you count those, it's still very small, but the press, of course, gives it a lot of prominence. And I think Terry's point's well taken. Now, when you've had people cry wolf, the next time we're always going to be a little more skeptical, and especially when supposedly they were in MAGA hats and there were just a lot of things that just didn't match up. It not only has affected him, but affected our perception of the next action that might actually deserve our time and attention, our concern, and our compassion. So let's take a break. I see we got a bank of phone calls developing, and I want to spend some time talking about that. I might mention as well that the first article, which I think is really a very good one, Let's Chill About Hate Crimes, is good. A little bit later, as the calls drop off a little bit, I do want to talk about the issue of using a national emergency. Does that make sense in terms of justified building a wall? And then also some of the decisions about Amazon in New York City and some of the pushback there as well. So let's take a break. We'll come back with more right after this.
Here's some great news. If you missed the deadline to sign up for health insurance, or more importantly, if you sign up for a plan that you're just not happy with, you still have a choice. It's called MediShare, and MediShare is a Christian healthcare sharing program. It's been around for 25 years. They have more than 400,000 members now around the country. And get this, over the years, MediShare members have shared more than $2 billion of each other's medical bills, so they could help share your needs too. And best of all, you could save a lot of money with MediShare. The typical savings for a family is around $500 a month. Your savings could be more or less, but think about what you could do with that extra money every month. So if you think you're stuck with a high-cost health plan that doesn't have much to offer, think again. You can join MediShare anytime, so call them today and check it out. There's no pressure. They're super easy to talk to. 855-90-BIBLE. That's 855-90-BIBLE. 855-90-BIBLE.
It takes a team to win. Be part of Point of View's Truth Team and bring truth and healing to America. Go to pointofview.net/team, pointofview.net/team, and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kerby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of view, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I'm just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Continue your conversation today. If you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Talking about what you might call the Jussie Smollett issue, but I'm really wanting to make that broader than him. We don't know all the facts. We know enough now to really have some questions about this, but really what I want to do is focus on, has the media done us a disservice by jumping to so many conclusions? We saw this with the Covington kids. We see this with some of the things that happened even in the hearings for Brett Kavanaugh. We certainly see it here. I just the last hour gave you some quotes from various presidential contenders who used that in an inappropriate way. I pointed out that the media could have done a better job of at least having some disclaimers. But we have to also recognize that this is not a new phenomenon. There are two things I'm starting to notice in terms of the way the media reacts. First is, this had to happen eventually. We knew sooner or later somebody would give a false report. What? We've been collecting false reports even on Point of View for the better part of this last decade. And I'll give you a few examples just of commentaries that I've written. And I'm not the only one that's writing on these by any stretch of the imagination. As a matter of fact, you can find you can type in words like fake hate crimes and find all sorts of columnists that have addressed this issue. So that's the first issue. The other one, as I saw one commentator saying, the giddiness among Trumpsters over the Summit news is gross. And she's getting upset because, well, they're just excited that this is going to reflect poorly on him. No, that's not what it is doing is causing a lot of people to say, once again, the media hasn't done its service. It hasn't been a little more careful, and that, I think, is the big issue. But if you're not familiar with the stories, and I want to go back to the phone since we have a bank of phone calls, but I think 3 or 4 years ago, I wrote the story about this individual that worked in Whole Foods in Austin, and they found a cake that had been decorated with a homophobic statement. And first of all, as I love Molly Hemingway said, if you're going to perpetrate a hoax, don't pick Whole Foods in liberal Austin, Texas, especially when the cake decorator is a member of the LGBT community. And that one, of course, turned out to be a hoax. So there's one on the issue of homosexuality. Let's take another one, racism. This one, I think, comes from back a year or two ago. 3 black co-eds, University of Alabama, University of Albany, 3 black co-eds at the University of Albany said they were attacked on a city bus by a group of white men using racial slurs. Now, if you're not familiar with that particular case, since I go to Albany, New York every once in a while, you had hundreds of people on the campus there rallying against racism based upon what was a false report. How do they know that? Well, it turns out that these buses have surveillance cameras, and as soon as they showed it, they show that these 3 women were actually beating up, in one particular case, a 19-year-old white woman on the bus. So they were the perpetrators rather than the victims. And then, of course, the Islam issue as well. You've had a number of Muslim women, University of Louisiana, University of Michigan, University of New Mexico, a couple of the places, but making false claims that they were attacked and had their head coverings pulled off. Or you have the student at Beloit College reported an anti-Muslim graffiti on his door outside his dorm room. They investigated and realized that he had perpetrated the fraud himself. So I gave you, an example out of, a false fake crime related to homosexuality, a false hate crime in terms of African American students, and a couple actually, for Islam. But again, these are done either to draw attention to themselves or to perpetuate the idea that we're racist, we're homophobic, we're Islamophobic. And does that mean that none of those cases which are reported are true? No. But that's the problem, because you have individuals reporting fake crimes and fake hate crimes. And I think in some respects it has a detrimental effect on those individuals that maybe are victims. And second of all, it just perpetuates this idea that this is an evil country where your life is at stake anytime you go outside your door. Well, let's take some more phone calls and get some of your comments. Brenda in Georgia. Brenda, what would you like to add to our conversation today?
Good afternoon, Kerby. Thank you for taking my call. I have two parts. First of all, addressing the Jussie Smollett issue. It makes me wonder, if it's a hoax, and I kind of believe it is, it makes me wonder, who's motivating him. I wondered if he just came up with this himself. And the reason that came to mind is I've read some articles online and seen some pictures of him with, key Democratic political figures. Like I've seen him with Michelle and Barack Obama and with Kamala Harris and others. So just, in this day and age with them gearing up for 2020, it just right away makes me think, well, is this something that they're doing to try to, get people to turn against President Trump even more, and, perhaps they'll get some votes for themselves, the Democratic Party. But I'm just wondering who would put him up to that. I don't think it's something he might have just decided to do on his own. And then when you're talking about the media, I do a lot of reading. I also noticed that, for example, ABC and CBS, some of their leaders or the presidents, they're related. Some of them are married to certain Democratic people who worked for Obama and the Obama administration. So I believe, the media is in the Democrats' back pocket. So they're going to, of course, blast and promote anything that's going to be, anti-Trump and anti this administration and try to make him look bad. So I think all of it is just politically based, that they're trying to do anything they can to make sure that they win in 2020, and that people turn against President Trump, which a lot of people are his enemies as it is. But I'm a black woman, and I thank God that the Lord woke me up to what's really going on, and there are a lot of other black people who are waking up, and we're not just, automatically. I used to be a Democrat for many years, but in 2012, when I noticed that the DNC, wanted to vote God off their bylaws, they booed the Lord, in effect, then I said, I can't be on anybody's team who they're against God, so I became an independent. And, through reading, the Lord's opened my eyes, and I see that everything's not as it seems. And a lot more black people are waking up and getting off the Democratic plantation, so to speak. So that's what I wanted to say. I think it's all politically motivated.
Well, I think you said it very well. Brenda, again, I don't try to judge people's motives, although some have been suggested. One is that, is it possible that Jussie Smollett was going to be written out of the show? So that could be one. Of course, he is very candid, and he's free to do so. It is a free country to say that he dislikes Donald Trump, abhors him, and if indeed this was constructed by him, and I believe that it probably was, I mean, he went overboard. If they weren't wearing the Make America Great hats, I might say possibly. If he had just been robbed, of course, that wouldn't have been that big a deal, unfortunately. I hate to say it because I've been robbed. My wife has been mugged. I mean, almost all of us have had that, and that's almost non-newsworthy, especially in a place like Chicago. But nevertheless, I wonder about some of the motives there. And so since we don't know, maybe we'll find out over time. When we come back, though, I do want to give you some of the facts and figures. The FBI has given us the log of the number of so-called hate crimes, using their definition, that have occurred in the first year of the Trump administration. Soon we'll have the second year as well. And I'll give you those numbers right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
The political drama in Virginia might just be a preview of a wild, contentious Democratic primary. In fact, Rich Lowry believes we might be seeing the beginning of the first woke primary. To be woke is to be alert and sensitive to any injustice, whether real or perceived. A governor had an image of someone in blackface in his medical school yearbook. That apparently was enough to call for his resignation. Democrats in Virginia faced a growing problem. The publication of an image in blackface in the governor's yearbook was followed by an admission from the attorney general that he had used blackface as well. All the while, accusations were swirling around the lieutenant governor, who was accused of sexual assault. We've been told to believe all women. If so, then he would have to go as well. The controversy in Virginia is merely a preview of a woke primary where any mistake or misjudgment, even in the distant past, can be disqualifying. Any misstep will be viewed through the most hostile lens from a radicalized base of Democratic voters. Rich Lowry concludes the Democrat nomination battle might as well be fought on the campus of Oberlin College and officiated by the Director of Office of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. White male candidates don't stand a chance. Senator Elizabeth Warren has been criticized for pretending to be a Native American and forced to apologize. Senator Kirsten Gillibrand was confronted on television because a number of years ago she used the term illegal alien. She said she was embarrassed and forced to apologize for a term that was in common usage at the time. And even Senator Kamala Harris has been criticized because she was once a prosecutor. This may be the most contentious and controversial primary season we've ever seen in America. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
From roadside attractions, Run the Race. Two brothers share an unbreakable bond, but life's unexpected adversities put their future in question. Run the Race, rated PG, in theaters February 22nd.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported for truth.
Back once again, if you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. I see one of our callers wants to talk about the border, and I want to get into this issue in just a minute of whether or not it is constitutional to actually use the emergency order to actually begin to build the wall. But let me finish off at least with a comment on the issue of hate crimes. This is a new designation. I've always had concerns about hate crimes because a crime is a crime, and when you start forcing individuals to try to determine motive, that doesn't make a great deal of sense, except whether it was premeditated or a crime of passion. But trying to figure out what was in the heart of an individual. Somebody comes up there and robs you or even assaults you, and they are just in a bad mood. That is one kind of crime, but if they say something that is racist, homophobic, Islamophobic, whatever it might be, then that's seen as a different kind of crime. No, I think you judge the action, not that. But nevertheless, we now have the FBI having a designation called hate crimes. And so if we look at the first full year of the Trump administration, 2017, pretty soon we're going to have the numbers for 2018. But for 2017, they log about 7,000 incidents that in one way or another are fit as hate crimes. Now, there's two issues you need to have as a disclaimer. Number one, anything fits into that category, including graffiti, vandalism, something that might be written on a wall, something that might have been spray painted onto a garage. If you've listened to this program, you know that some of those were done by, again, individuals trying to gain sympathy. So the first issue is we're not talking about actual assaults. And in that are ones that are incidents which were reported as hate crimes, but as I just pointed out, turn out not to be. But the other thing that Kyle Smith points out in his piece is even though 7,000 sounds like a lot, if you go back and look at the incident rate, it's about 0.02%, because we're a very big country. And so, again, just it's important to put that in some kind of perspective. And so I did want to address that issue. But if you are interested in the next topic, because I see one of our callers wants to address this issue of border control, one of the questions that was raised is, well, the president wants to use a national emergency to justify building the wall. And, of course, Gregory Court, a correspondent for USA Today, even said that there are about 30 different national emergencies. So I posted a fact check on that, and it is true. There are, at the moment, if we've counted accurately, 31 different national emergencies in effect. 58 have been declared since 1979, and 3 under President Donald Trump. And that is the National Emergency Act, which I think needs to be modified, but that's another story, which we'll get to in just a few minutes, gives the president the power to declare a national emergency, make use of activated authority on a selective basis, and so gives that kind of thing. President Barack Obama declared 12 national emergencies during his presidency, and 10 which are still in effect. Now, I would agree with a piece that came out just recently by the Wall Street Journal in which they said just because President Obama abused certain actions is no justification for President Donald Trump to do so. I agree. One of the things my daughters would agree with, certainly one thing my wife would agree with, and certainly one thing my mother taught me is 2 wrongs don't make a right. And the point that they are making here is Democrats cheered on President Barack Obama's legal abuses on immigration, and now Republicans are cheering on President Donald Trump on the declaration of a border emergency to build a wall. And the point that they make later on in the article is Republicans should have learned their lesson with the overreach of President Barack Obama. Mr. Obama was rebuked by the Supreme Court on recess appointments and on environmental regulation. And as a matter of fact, he was also rebuked again on immigration when a court, a judge here in the state of Texas, by the way, rescinded his unilateral grant of work permits to dreamer immigrants and things like that. And again, even ruled for the Republican House that Mr. Obama violated the Constitution by spending money on Obamacare that the Congress had not appropriated. And, of course, at the time, and we talked about this on Friday with Dr. Merrill Matthews, we, even on this program, said, you know, Democrats better not cheer too much what President Obama's doing, because who knows, maybe the next president, a Republican, who maybe isn't constitutionally limited, might take that as an excuse to do what he wants to do. And guess what? That's what President Trump has done. My feeling is if we really want to honestly deal with the Constitution, there are unbelievably unique circumstances, like a war or a huge disaster, where the president might be given the right to exercise that kind of discretionary authority. But when we are not dealing with something that is an imminent disaster, like a horrible, catastrophic disaster that affects most of the nation, or a war, we should expect our elected representatives in Congress to deal with those issues. But again, some of those questions are surfacing now with the issue of border control. So let me go to the state of Missouri. I think, Colin, you have some comments about that. So thank you for calling today.
Yes, I was speaking out. I'm a pastor, and I have 4 grandkids and people coming in, whatever they are. Before I was pastor 30 years ago, I knew people that were bringing stuff across the border, and they paid the border guards $250,000 every time they crossed, and they came up with a semi, and the guy that was in it had a nickname. Most mobsters do. I knew him as Kurt the Chameleon. On one side of the street, he was shooting guns with the police and selling guns, and on the other side of the street, he had a semi full of dope they would pull up. But the people that are down at the border and wanting all these people coming in here, they're carrying dope in here, and the government has always been involved in it, and the American people are the last ones to know. or it's kept secret. And Donald Trump is getting an education on it all right now in the midst of his election. So, and the same way, everybody has champions, and Tony Evans is one of mine. And he said, we all came here on different ships, but we're all in the same boat now. We're all in here, and I haven't talked to a nationality of people that hasn't had something pulled on them that don't think this land ought to belong to them. And we go over and we bomb people's countries and tear them all up. They don't got no place to live. So, and they see us with our uniforms on. They think they should come over here and stay with us, and they should. But we can't just let anybody come in here.
No, certainly we can. And back to the drug issue for just a minute. One of the arguments we're hearing right now, Colin, is most of those drugs are coming through ports of entry. Well, guess what? Because the ports of entry are so clogged up, and because we don't know how to do the best job of drug interdiction, that's where some of them are coming through. But I think, building barriers, walls, and things like that force more through the entry, and then putting more Border Patrol there and more sophisticated devices might give us an opportunity to prevent that. But I think the biggest issue is we've got to stop the desire. Right now there is such a demand in America for drugs. And what we also need to do is fight the drug war by drug testing and helping people through various kinds of drug counseling so that the demand for drugs is going to be less, and thus the opportunity for finance for these drug lords is going to be less as well. So you've got some good points, and unfortunately, as you said, a lot of that is slipping through into America every single day.
Well, here's another one on the drugs. That big drug lord just got busted and sent to prison. He has all that big money. You don't think he's paid lobbyists up there with the ward minority put into it and bringing them in here. Anybody that's in construction or anybody that's in a union, they have to have somebody by law that's classified as by law. They got to have them, and if you're not a minority, you're on the list last to work. And they just need to make it fair. Everybody. Yeah,
that's another point. Yeah.
And everybody should fair, Donald Trump says. Let's make it fair.
I would agree. And again, we mentioned drug testing, but the other E-Verify is another way to go about that. You mentioned just something in passing, though, because we, of course, have indeed convicted El Chapo, Joaquin Guzman. And one of the suggestions from Senator Ted Cruz is let's take all the money that El Chapo created as a drug lord and use that to build the wall. Of course, I'm sure there'll be some liberal federal judge that says you can't even use drug money to build a wall to prevent drugs from coming into the country. But anyway, that's another story. So, Colin, appreciate your phone call. I just was coming to a mandatory break and appreciate your perspective on that. I love the quote. Of course, Tony Evans is a good friend. We all came over on different boats, some on slave boats, some on other kinds of boats, but we're in one big boat together now. And so that, I think, is something to remind ourselves of as well. Let's take a break. And when we come back, I want to talk a little bit about my commentary, see if we can get into a couple more issues, and we'll still take a phone call or two. So if you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. Been talking about lots of issues today here on Point of View. We'll continue right after this.
Question, do you have a health insurance plan you are not happy with? Well, Bethany and Jason thought they were stuck. Their plan just kept getting more expensive, and Bethany's favorite doctor didn't even take that plan anymore. And then some friends at church told them about MediShare.
With our previous insurance, we were paying $1,200 a month. With MediShare, we now pay around $600 a month.
Yes, they're paying $600 less per month, and that's a pretty typical savings with MediShare. And they actually like MediShare more.
I was able to go back to my original doctor that I absolutely loved, and it's just been an absolutely beautiful thing being a part of MediShare.
Yeah, so they pay a lot less, and they like it more. No wonder MediShare is growing so fast. Find out more. They're super easy to talk to. All you have to do is call 855-90-BIBLE. That's 855-90-BIBLE. 855-90-BIBLE.
It takes a team to win. Be part of Point of View's Truth Team and bring truth and healing to America. Go to pointofview.net/team, pointofview.net/team, and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
If you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. Last half hour, an open line. We'll get into a couple of other issues. We've been talking about the possibility of fake hate crimes, the need for us to have discernment. We've also talked about border security. That'll be our next phone call here as well, because it gets into whether or not it really makes sense to apply this emergency declaration to building a wall when we have the opportunity for Congress to consider these issues. And I think it is something that we need to come and look back at. As we pointed out, one of the articles we've posted indeed reminds us that you have 31 different emergency actions that have been implemented and are in some kind of effect right now. 58 have been declared since 1979. Only 3 under the current president, Donald Trump, 12 under the previous president, Barack Obama. So perhaps you have some comments about that. Before we finish this half hour, I do want to talk about the decision about Amazon. And again, some of the backlash developing in the Democrat Party, in this particular case from Representative Carolyn Maloney, who said, as a Democrat, a very liberal Democrat, who on most issues would probably agree with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She's got 100% rating with gun control, 100% rating with Planned Parenthood on abortion, 100% rating with the Human Rights Campaign, and on and on and on. But still says, I remember when Democrats used to protest the war. Why are we protesting jobs and forcing Amazon to leave? So I'm going to get into that, which also relates very much to my commentary today, which we haven't talked about. But if you haven't seen it, you might want to get the woke politics. How I think this next primary is going to be one where, in some respects, there's going to be a lot of contentious comments being made, which led to, interestingly enough, at least one individual, Bill Maher, saying, Democrats, can we try not to eat our own? And I'm afraid it's a little too late for that warning, but we'll get into that as well. Let's take some phone calls, though. We'll go, first of all, to the state of California. Shelley, what would you like to add to our conversation today?
Hi, Kerby. I just want to say I'm a big fan. I've been listening since back in the day when Marla Maddox was heading it up. But
thank you.
Yeah, the issue I really wanted, I live in California. I was raised here, born and raised here in the Central Valley. And, I mean, as far as immigration goes, we need immigration. I don't think California would function without immigration, but we need legal immigration. And I agree with you 100% that Congress is neglecting their duties and they need to get on the ball and fix the problem. But since they are refusing to do that, I feel like this is a national emergency. And the issue isn't even for me the drugs coming over or the people coming over. The issue for me is the fact that we have organized caravans that are being financed and paid for, creating an invasion. This is a threat to our country, and if they keep coming in by the thousands and hundreds of thousands, we're not going to have a country. So I feel like President Trump is right to declare this an emergency, and I really don't feel like he's doing it for a campaign promise. I feel like he's really looking at what our border agents are dealing with and all the horrible human trafficking. He even mentioned in his last TV broadcast that, you know, they can't come through checkpoints with women with duct tape over their mouths. They have to smuggle them in some other way. And so I think that's the real issue here is protecting our borders from people that are financing these caravans that are literally trying to overthrow America. So that's why I think it should be done, not for any other reason, even though all those other reasons are very important and should also be dealt with and taken care of.
The argument is that some of the money that was allocated could build another 55 miles. And, of course, in the state of California, you've seen what happens down there in San Ysidro and a couple of other places. And, of course, where we're broadcasting from today, near the Rio Grande Valley. I'm in the state of Texas today, so obviously we are talking about what happens in that valley. But there are some places, as you said, that really need some protection if indeed you have these caravans mounting up. So I really appreciate you calling in today and giving us your point of view.
Thank you, Kerby.
If you'd like to join our conversation, that number is 1-800-351-1212. Let's pick up on what Shelley said, because if indeed you see this as an emergency, then I'll be the first to admit that what we have posted here would fit, and that is we've had this national emergency proclamation. And so that is certainly one that has existed for some time in other forms, because, as I've said already, you have had a number of presidents that have indeed used that. And so that is the case. When we get into what has been done under other presidents, it's been allowed. And interestingly enough, the only way you can actually terminate a national emergency is for Congress to act, which is one of the reasons why we have about 30 different emergencies that have been implemented. And I looked up a few of those, and then I'll take another phone call. One of the national emergencies is for the H1N1 flu pandemic. Isn't that over? Can we get rid of that one, maybe? One is an emergency on Russian uranium stockpiles. One is for addressing situations in places like Burundi, Somalia, Yemen, and Venezuela. And so, again, you can see that some of these have a life of their own, and that's one of the reasons to be a little bit concerned about this policy, which, on the one hand, you want an executive, the president in particular, to have some kind of freedom, because, after all, there are emergencies, and if we wait for the slow and plodding Congress to get around to it, then that's not going to work. And I think Shelley's argument is a compelling one. We have an emergency because we have these caravans coming, and apparently a lot of members of Congress, some of those even in the state of California where she was calling from, don't see that as a real issue and certainly an emergency. So we'll see where this plays itself out. But I did want to, if nothing else, put on our website here this fact check, because some people have said, do we really have that many emergencies? Yes, we do. More than 30. Let's go back to the phones. We'll go to North Carolina this time. And Carol, what would you like to add to our conversation?
In the beginning, I was against the wall. I thought, the friendship, and we need love, and who our neighbors are. But I was reminded this week that God has a wall. It's made of jasper and all of the beautiful wall, and it's got a gate that you go through. And if your name's not in that book, you can't get in that gate. So they're discriminatory who they allow in. And Satan has open borders. And I thought that was a very, very good point.
I have heard that before, because you do have walls in the new heaven and the new earth. You have a wall, you have gates. Of course, you can read that in basically Revelation 21 and 22. And again, as you read that, that's an argument I've heard some people making. So, Carol, I appreciate you adding that to our conversation today.
I have another comment on that. Nehemiah had just as much trouble getting his wall built as Trump is having.
That's a great line.
Read Nehemiah. Maybe God wants us to have a wall.
Yes. Sam Ballot and some of them certainly caused a problem. So, yes, that's right. That's another way to look at that. And again, what I find so interesting, and I understand that sometimes people have a repulsion to the idea of a wall. You've seen some great videos saying walls are immoral. Look at the Berlin Wall. Well, that was to keep people from escaping. This wall is to keep people from invading. And there is a sense in which those walls and those barriers have been effective. And when people say that they aren't effective, they haven't paid attention to our history in this country. They haven't paid attention to the success of walls in places like Israel, Hungary, a variety of other places like those around the world. So there are good examples of walls, and they don't necessarily have to be labeled as immoral if indeed you're just trying to make sure that you have a country that has some integrity. A wall doesn't mean you wouldn't have a gate. Matter of fact, we do have entrance, but we would like to have a wall with a door and bring people in that we want to bring in, but keep people out that don't need to come here. But let's go back to the phones. I can berate that, but I'm sure you can make the case even better than I can. So we'll go to Florida. Larry, what would you like to add to our conversation today?
I just would like to add about our diplomats around the world to bring in peace in those nations, because there's no peace. A war going on in their country. They're torn apart. They have no place to live, no food or water. So what are the best place to come? Where's their food, water, and health? To the United States. So why not, that's why they travel in these caravans towards the United States. They're looking for help. And the United States pulling out of Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, and the war-torn countries where the people are fleeing from, they don't have nothing to stay for. that this is what everybody was talking about. Why not try to bring peace around the world? What Jimmy Carter was doing when he was in office. That's all I have to say.
Well, appreciate your comment. And again, one of the things that has maybe, if we want to use our southern border as an example, there aren't quite as many people coming from Mexico because the Mexican economy is doing well. A lot of these caravans are starting in El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, or places like that. And so, again, can we do some things to increase the standard of living in those individuals, bring about peace, and prevent the corruption and the drug lords that are actually dominating those societies? If so, won't have as many people trying to cross into this country. Good points. We'll take a break. Be back with more right after this.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. When the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit declined to review a decision of that court that said that the cross-shaped Bladensburg World War I Veterans Memorial is unconstitutional, not all the judges agreed. Chief Judge Gregory noted his dissent. He said, quote, "Nearly a century ago, Maryland citizens, out of deep respect and gratitude, took on the daunting task of erecting a monument to mirror the measure of individual devotion and sacrifice these heroes had so nobly advanced. The panel majority says their effort violates the Constitution the soldiers fought to defend. I, respectfully, think otherwise." Judge Niemeyer said with some exasperation, quote, "Until this action was filed by persons who claimed to be offended by the presence of the monument, no complaint had been made about its presence," unquote. But Judge Wilkinson was poetic in his dissent. He wrote, quote, "The dead cannot speak for themselves, but may the living hear their silence. This memorial and this cross have stood for almost one full century. Life and change flow by the small park in the form of impatient cars and trucks. That is disturbance enough," unquote. He concluded simply noting that the park in which the memorial stands, quote, "may not be Arlington National Cemetery, but it is the next thing to it. I would let the cross remain and let those honored rest in peace," unquote. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
Hi, I'm Kelly Shackelford, President and Chief Counsel of First Liberty Institute. I hope you enjoyed this episode of First Liberty Briefing. You can learn more amazing stories about how everyday Americans are standing up and saving religious freedom. Just visit firstliberty.org. You'll be inspired, educated, and informed. Visit firstliberty.org right now.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back once again, if you would like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. But I want to put at least one more thing on the table, and that is the question about the decision at Amazon. You perhaps don't live in the state of New York, but I think you should pay attention to this for just a minute, because this particular piece by Dana Pico kind of gets into what we have to pay attention to if we want to grow an economy. And the argument was that we don't want, that is, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and many of her ilk, we do not want Amazon to come to New York City. And the argument that she made was that, indeed, New Yorkers, quote, deserve dignified jobs in New York City, We don't have to settle for scraps in the greatest city in the world. Now, what that comment and some others did was cause Amazon to say, okay, we're leaving. Now, it wasn't the only thing. As a matter of fact, I saw someone also said when I talked to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez or some of her ilk, they were talking about we don't want Amazon. Others were talking about unions or whatever. But what has been interesting is to see the incredible backlash within the Democratic Party. And I'll just use one example. Representative Carolyn Maloney, I mentioned her name just a minute ago. She is a representative that has actually the person that would be in the district where the Amazon headquarters would be. She is outraged because they were estimating that it might create 25,000 jobs. But if you've seen the interview that she's done, she said it could eventually be 100,000 jobs, number one. Number two, this would have made, she believes, New York City to be the kind of the tech center of the East Coast, and now they're running away. But the piece that I've posted here by Dana Pico goes on to say, what is this idea of a dignified job? You know, again, I tend to be one of those dirty jobs kind of people and say, wait a minute, any job I had was a good job, you know. And those of us that have worked in machine shops, dug ditches, even volunteered. He was talking about the one right here where he volunteered to put on a roof. I've done on more than a couple, just volunteering. I mean, I know what hard work can be like, and I've worked as a janitor. You know, but again, you probably have worked even harder jobs than some of the ones I've done. But he says, wait a minute. The average estimated job for those people working at Amazon would be $150,000 a year. And so he said, I've got to ask, what's a dignified job? Wouldn't 25,000 jobs at an estimated average of $150,000 a year been dignified? He says, you know, people employed full-time after 25 years of age with a professional degree have a median individual income of $117,000, which seems high, but okay. And those with a doctoral degree have $101,000. But again, those people that have just finished high school but not gone into college, that's a $38,000. And again, I'll just trust his numbers. Some of them didn't seem quite right. But the point he's making is every one of those, whether you have an advanced degree, whether you have just a college degree, whether you have just a high school degree, certainly even if you have, you know, whatever, $150,000 a year, that's good work if you can get it. And they just got chased out of New York City simply because of the kind of rhetoric of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And so one of the things that I think we should pay attention to is we're moving into a time in which it's possible that the Democratic Party might start imploding on itself. And that brings me to my commentary today, which is entitled Woke Politics. And that is Rich Lowry, I'm borrowing the idea from him, said we may see the first woke primary. You might say, what's woke? Every time I say that, people go, do we have to use that phrase? I know. Can we come up with a better one? But to be woke in the common parlance is to be alert and sensitive to any injustice, whether perceived or real. And so, of course, we've seen what's been happening in Virginia. Have the governor of Virginia might have to step down because he had a picture of somebody with blackface and a Ku Klux Klan outfit in his medical school yearbook. You have the attorney general say, well, I've used blackface. You even have the lieutenant governor who was accused of sexual assault. And after all, if you're supposed to believe all women, he's gone. But I think what I say in my commentary here, which you can read in its entirety on pointofview.net, is I think this is just giving us a preview of what's going to happen in the primary. Rich Lowry says the Democrat primary could very well look like it was taking place on the campus of Oberlin College, which, by the way, is a very liberal university, officiated by the Director of Office of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. And I point out, I don't think a white male candidate in the Democratic Party has a chance right now. And let me just take the women. Senator Elizabeth Warren, been criticized for pretending to be a Native American and forced to apologize. Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, confronted on television just the other day because she used the term illegal alien, said she was embarrassed, forced to apologize for a term that was in common usage at the time. Senator Kamala Harris has been criticized because she was once a prosecutor. I mean, this is getting sort of out of hand. And then, of course, this counterpoint between Representative Carolyn Maloney and Representative Ocasio-Cortez just over the issue of Amazon. And I love Carolyn Maloney's comment. As Democrats, we used to protest wars. Now we're protesting jobs. What has happened to us? And, of course, the question that many of the Democratic representatives have about whether or not to support this idea of a Green New Deal, a Medicare for all. It is going to be a really interesting and very contentious primary, I suspect. So let me just mention that my commentary is available on the website today, and you can actually sign up to receive my commentaries in your inbox every single day. It's free of charge. And, of course, Penna Dexter's comes on Saturday. So mine come to your inbox Monday through Friday, hers on Saturday. And we'll take one more phone call since I've got at least one left here. North Carolina. Sandra, you'll have the final word for today. What would you like to add?
This used to be a God-fearing country. Now our Democratic Party has sold their soul to Satan to destroy the United States so they can say how bad Trump was because they hate Trump. They don't care anything about the United States. They just hate Trump.
Well, again, let me be fair. You know, not all Democrats would agree with that, but some of the elites, some of the leadership, that's the case. And I'm seeing a real schism right now because some of the people that were saying, wait a minute, we used to have some common sense. We used to be rational. What's happening right now? And I think in part it isn't just necessarily liberals or Democrats, but it's the so-called left. I make a distinction between the left and liberals. A liberal would say, I support your right to say something even if I disagree with it. A leftist say, no, you don't have a right to say it at all. You are homophobic, Islamophobic, racist, you're whatever, and you don't even have an opportunity to express your point of view. So we have to understand that even within liberalism, even within the Democratic Party, even at universities, the left is starting to drive the conversation, and it is a very intolerant view indeed, and so we'll see where that takes us. Just before we run out of time, let me again mention my Viewpoints commentary today, but also as you go to the website, you'll notice that we still are offering an opportunity for you to join us with a trip to Israel. You can just click on the button that says Find Out More. We're going to Israel October 18th to the 27th. Rome from 27th to the 30th. You can come just to Israel or Israel and Rome. And I would hope that some of you might even click on that button and check it out, because what we are providing is a very inexpensive plan. I had somebody call me the other day and said, how is it we were trying to do a tour and yours is almost half of ours? How do you do that? Well, we don't bring a big entourage. We try to save some money, but give you an opportunity to actually walk where Jesus walked. And if you come with us to Rome, to walk where Paul walked. And so I hope you'll check that out. It's available at our website, pointofview.net. And if you need a brochure, we can mail it to you, or you can just click on there and even print out the reservation and the various itinerary. Tomorrow we have former Congresswoman Linda Smith. Looking forward to a great conversation then. We'll see you back here tomorrow on Point of View.
Question, do you have a health insurance plan you are not happy with? Well, Bethany and Jason thought they were stuck. Their plan just kept getting more expensive, and Bethany's favorite doctor didn't even take that plan anymore. And then some friends at church told them about MediShare.
With our previous insurance, we were paying $1,200 a month. With MediShare, we now pay around $600 a month.
Yes, they're paying $600 less per month, and that's a pretty typical savings with MediShare, and they actually like MediShare more.
I was able to go back to my original doctor that I absolutely loved, and it's just been an absolutely beautiful thing being a part of MediShare.
Yeah, so they pay a lot less, and they like it more. No wonder MediShare is growing so fast. Find out more. They're super easy to talk to. All you have to do is call 855-90-BIBLE. That's 855-90-BIBLE. 855-90-BIBLE.
It takes a team to win. Be part of Point of View's Truth Team and bring truth and healing to America. Go to pointofview.net/team, pointofview.net/team, and 800-347-5151. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.